What is up guys, Greedy Knight here with a video discussing the new weapon swapping mechanic in Monster Hunter Wilds. I'll be going over what it is and speculate what it means for set building and combat. Let's get into it. Weapon swapping is the new mechanic in Monster Hunter Wilds of being able to change weapons during the hunt. It does exist in World and Rise, but you have to return to camp to swap weapons, sets, and buddies. Wilds is the first time you can swap to a secondary weapon mid-fight by riding on your Sacred. Since you must be mounted to initiate a swap, you can't swap weapons mid-combo like in Devil May Cry. In comparison, the camp swapping gives you access to your entire crafted inventory and save set loadouts, while this new weapon swap mechanic limits you to just a second weapon. You trade off the coverage of the camp set swap for the dynamic combat changes of the weapon swap. Because you are limited in what you can bring for the secondary weapon, you have to strategize on what is the best weapon pair for you. This gives an incentive to explore other weapons, weapon subtypes, and builds to add a whole level of depth to both combat and set building. You need to farm for 2 sets, meaning you will hunt for twice the materials for weapons and decorations. Through the interviews with the creators, there is confirmation that the armor sets will have more skills to promote weapon swap pairs. Basically, they will slap on more skills onto armor pieces, but one skill may favor one weapon while the other will favor the other. As you rank up, there will be more skills added to armor pieces in general, and this system already exists with skill combos like handicraft and ammo up being attached to one armor piece. With the new mechanic, now most armors will have things like load shells, quick sheath, and other weapon specific skills to encourage players to use gun lance with longsword or charge blade with hammer. And of course, the generic boosts like attack up can be used regardless of weapon. For set building, you will have to jigsaw your way to a perfect set depending on weapon pair. You could be using entirely different pieces just by changing your primary or secondary weapon. So why does weapon swapping matter? On a basic level, you can swap from greatsword to gunner as showcased in the trailer. Using both blade master and gunner requires good knowledge of both weapon classes to effectively hunt. It's not as hard as using greatsword and swapping to dual blades, for example, because they share a similar skill pool and you are fighting close range with both weapons. The greatest strength of swapping to another weapon type is matchup coverage and the ability to shift your playstyle. Let's say hammer does not fare well against Rajang, but it does fare well against Rathalos. You can swap to a mobile weapon like dual blades to keep up with Rajang, and then swap to hammer to bonk the Rathalos. The only caveat to this strategy is that you have to learn both weapons. In effect, weapon swapping increases the complexity of set building and farming for both builds, while rewarding players that multi-class and those who build multiple sets with more options in the hunt. You are incentivized to hunt a lot, build a lot of sets, and experiment with new weapons. If you don't care about the mechanic, on the other hand, then you are given the option to swap to the same weapon type, just a shift to status, element, or raw. Overall, this mechanic appears to be well designed from the ground up, so I look forward to messing around with sets and finding weapon pairs. There are a few gimmick strategies worth going over. For the first strategy, you use Hunting Horn for the buffs and then swap to your main weapon. This way you can get damage boost, defense boost, regen effects, immunities, or whatever other song buff you want to use during the fight. The best part is if you are playing online, you can provide the support and then swap to a high DPS weapon instead of being stuck on Hunting Horn. It is also a drawback for Hunting Horn mains, with their weapon being relegated to support only. Because Hunting Horn is one of the blunt weapons, you could pair it with a cutting weapon to allow you to stun the monster and cut tails, giving incentive to learn and use a blunt and cutting weapon pair regardless of which ones you pick. The second is the stun gun strategy, which abuses traps, paralysis, and stun to lock the monster in an immobile state. Then you can swap to a high damage weapon to maximize DPS. Heavy bowgun will stun lock the monster, and then you spam true charge slashes with greatsword to maximize damage during openings. You don't even have to use greatsword for this strategy, just any weapon with a quick but high damage combo to capitalize on stuns, paralysis, and topples. The third strategy is pairing an all evasion weapon with a guarding weapon, something like lance with dual blades. This way, you have a fast mode to dip, dive, and dodge with dual blades, then you have the option to swap to lance to become a blocking wall during the monster's more aggressive phases where you can't afford to dodge. This mimics the morphing weapons by having a fast mode and defensive mode like charge blade. Element weapons act as the kryptonite for one monster and are ineffective against another. By bringing a second element weapon, you can cover up to 2 monsters' weaknesses to max out on damage. There are a few anomalies like Gyarados and Barroth where they swap elemental resistances mid-fight. It causes you to do 0 elemental damage with thunder and fire when they are muddied up, so bust out the water weapon to hose off the mud with optimal damage. Because this is one obvious use for weapon swapping, I would assume there are more monsters that element swap to promote the swapping mechanic. Swapping to a status weapon like paralysis or sleep allows you to use the stun gun strategy for your weapon, but with varying degrees of success. The criteria for a good status weapon is whether it can perform multi-hits quickly. You have to rack up status and meet a threshold before the status is applied, and multiple attacks in a short window guarantee application. Your status buildup decays if you take too long to follow up attacks, and status has a 33% chance of applying on each hit. Weapons like dual blades, gunner, and charge blade are good at applying multiple hits in bursts, while a weapon like greatsword would have a rough time with applying status. If you main a slow attacking weapon, then this strategy is better if you swap off of your main. The third strategy allows you to swap quote-unquote modes for weapons with subtypes. Hunting Horn, Gun Lance, Switch Axe, Charge Blade, Insect Glaive, and Gunners all have multiple subtypes. Let's take Charge Blade for example. You can swap from an SAD Element Foul playstyle to a Buzzsaw Impact Foul playstyle. It mimics the switch skill swapping of Rise Break, but you run an optimized set for both playstyles. By bringing both foul types, you can stun the monster and output max element damage while overcoming the original trade-off of choosing between the 2 foul types. Gun Lance can swap between long, normal, and wide shelling, shifting playstyles as well. Switch Axe can use exhaust to stun and then power or element foul to unleash more damage. Hunting Horn can change song types to provide double the buffs, allowing you to provide all of the Hunting Horn support. Assuming the Kinsect swaps with your weapon, Insect Glaive can swap Kinsect types and Kinsect damage types to change how your Kinsect behaves in combat. Gunners have their own rabbit hole of changing subtypes that I'm not qualified to talk about in detail, but they benefit the most from this change because they have the most customization of any weapon in the game. Swapping ammo types or shot types can shift how you approach combat, as well as whether you have a shield or a scope. Monster Hunter has always been about strategizing how you will approach a hunt. In recent games, Capcom has emphasized providing more options to the player so we can hunt how we want. Many people in the community play multiple weapons while others main just the one. This mechanic somehow promotes both styles of play while enhancing set building and combat. Unlike Clutch Claw and underwater combat, it isn't mandatory to deal optimal damage and it doesn't make any one weapon worse. The weapon swapping mechanic's strength is that it allows the hunter to decide when to swap and what to swap to. It isn't a strict damage buff, it supplements existing mechanics while adding a whole other dimension of strategy. Overall, I like this mechanic because it adds that extra dimension to set building and combat. People harp about Monster Hunter dropping the strategy aspect of the game because of the various quality of life fixes, but this is both a return to form and a shake-up to how we approach the game. Like if this video was useful to you, consider subscribing if you want to see more Monster Hunter Wilds content like this. Comment your thoughts down below. That's all I got for this one. Greedy Knight, signing out.